Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, the Giro d'Italia is now Egan Bernal's to lose, or at least it is whilst we record this. He's been busy setting new climbing records at the race, and we'll look back at what was a thrilling second week of racing. And there's a whole heap of other racing as well, much of it in Spain with the Vuelta Andalucía, which saw another sprint deviation, the Vuelta a Burgos Feminas and the Vuelta a Murcia, plus the Tour de Finistère in France. And I'm also going to be telling you why Alberto Contador is riding from Madrid to Milan. There's a lot to get through, so we'd better crack on. The white gravel roads of Tuscany at the Giro d'Italia already feel like a long time ago, don't they? But it was with them that we started the second week of the race last Wednesday. Filippo Ganna was a bit like a kid at Christmas on the first sector of the race, splitting it to pieces with Egan Bernal on his wheel. Most of the GC favourites would end up in the selection, save for Davide Formolo, who'd crashed, and Dan Martin, who'd openly said afterwards he just wasn't willing to take any risks on what was a dangerous stage. Now, the day itself was won by Mauro Schmidt of Quebeca Assos, who put in some serious power in a long sprint to the line and beating Alessandro Covi of UAE Team Emirates in the process. But behind, it was Bernal giving a second demonstration of superiority at the race. He dropped the rest of the GC contenders, flew past Vlasov and caught Emmanuel Buchmann, who'd made an early attack. The result? A big shake-up of the GC, Bernal tightening his grip on the pink jersey. The stage also revealed a bit of a weakness in the armoury of Evenepoel, who clearly wasn't at home on the gravel roads, and we've since seen him nervous on descents. Not a big surprise, I guess, for someone that crashed so hard last year and for a man who only started racing 5 years ago. Andrea Vendrami took the biggest win of his career the following day, while stage 13 saw Giacomo Nizzolo finally pull off the big win. This Giro marks his 11th Grand Tour, and he had those much publicised 11 second places on Giro stages, so I don't think there was a single cycling fan who wasn't pleased to see him finally do it. And when you look at his numbers, you've got to say it was thoroughly deserved. Over 1,200 watts for the final 17 seconds, an average speed of 72 kilometres per hour and a max of over 78. That's 48.5 miles per hour on a flat road. Unbelievable. And he was apparently using a 56-tooth chainring as you do. And the man he beat to the line was Edoardo Affini, the Jumbo-Visma lead-out rider. He'd gone so hard in his lead-out that he'd gapped everybody else. His numbers, almost as impressive. 45 seconds at 850 watts and an average speed of 70 kilometres per hour. So you can understand why it was quite hard for anybody to catch him. Almost as impressive that day was the fact that Fernando Gaviria sprinted without a saddle. Thankfully, he realised it had come off, otherwise that could have been quite a nasty surprise just after the finish line. The following day was all about the Monte Zoncolan. The so-called easier side was used this year, but it was still like a wall towards the finish. Surprising everyone that day was Lorenzo Fortunato of Yolo Cometa. He caught and dropped Jan Tratnik, who'd attacked the breakaway on the lower slopes of the final climb. And what that victory means is that Alberto Contador, the team manager, is going to have to ride from Madrid to Milan. That was his promise at the very start of the race. At 1,500 kilometres, he'd better get his skates on, or an e-bike. Now I think from his reaction that he was fairly pleased with Fortunato's win.
¡Que ganamos! 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 ¡Sí! 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 ¡Wow! ¡Es Zoncolan! ¡Sí!
I don't think he went that berserk even when he won himself back in the day. Now moving on, it had been George Bennett that was the big favourite to take the win on the day, having got himself into the early break, but it wasn't to be for him. After the finish, he rode back down the climb, to the point at least where he saw Edoardo Affini, at which point he turned back round and rode with him to the finish to thank him for his work. A lovely gesture, I thought that was, and while strictly against UCI rules, it was quite nice to see him turn a blind eye to it and not give him a fine. And my goodness, did Affini put in a shift for Bennett on the day? On-screen graphics show that he averaged 360 watts for 4 hours, and at the point at which he came to a standstill, he still had to climb the Monte Zoncolan. Now, the general classification battle was on that day ignited by Simon Yates, with only Bernal able to follow his attack. It'd taken a while actually for things to get interesting in the group of main favourites, but despite that, there were some reasonable time gaps at the finish. Bernal would eventually ride away from Yates, crossing the line 11 seconds in front of him, but the big losers on the day were Alexander Vlasov, whose team had ridden for him the whole day. He conceded over a minute, Evenepoel more than 2. Now, the Climbing Records website took a closer look at the time set that day. So that side of the climb hadn't been used at the Giro d'Italia since 2003. Back then, it was Gilberto Simoni who won the stage whilst in the pink jersey, but his time was annihilated by Bernal, who rode up at 1 minute and 26 seconds quicker. Bernal had been posting his stage to Strava incidentally, complete with power numbers, but seems to have stopped doing that and even deleted a couple. So I haven't got his data, but we do know that Damiano Caruso averaged 403 watts for the entire climb and 419 watts for the final 13 minutes. Fast forward 24 hours to stage 15 and it was yet another victory for the breakaway. Giving us all a lesson in perseverance and persistency was Victor Campenaerts. He's been trying for years to take a stage win at a Grand Tour, and my goodness did he deserve that one. He and his teammates had started the attacking to get into the early break, and he was one of the first to attack in the closing stages of the race. He got the better of Oscar Isabek of the Alpecin Fenix team, a rider who started his sprint to the line a little bit too early. Campenaerts' win meant that Quebecer Assos had won 3 stages in the space of 5 days, and also that 11 of the first 15 stages have marked the first ever Grand Tour stage win for that rider. I'm not sure if that's happened in modern times. Where's Cillian Kelly when you need him? Now, unfortunately, whilst very entertaining, the second week of the race also gave us a reminder of just how dangerous the sport is. 17 riders, by my count, have abandoned the race over the last 5 stages, many of them due to crashes. GC riders Marc Soler and Emmanuel Buchmann were amongst them, and Alessandro De Marchis looked particularly worrying when we saw him stretchered off in an ambulance. 6 fractured ribs, 2 broken vertebrae and a broken collarbone. We wish all the riders the very best and a very quick recovery. It's never nice to see, is it? Meanwhile, we had the 4-day Vuelta a Burgos Feminas last week at the end of a block of Spanish racing for the women's peloton. Stage 1 was taken by Grace Brown of Team Bike Exchange. She'd attacked with just over 6 kilometres to go, taking Elise Chabi and Niamh Fisher-Black with her and out-sprinting both of them to the finish line. Anastasia Cecina soloed to victory the following day for Ale BTC Ljubljana, her first win in the World Tour, and it was the same for Cecilie Uttrup Ludwig on stage 3. Almost unbelievably, that was her first win in a World Tour race. And it wasn't just by slipping away on her own, it was a hilltop finish and she just blasted it all the way to the line, beating most of the world's top riders. And I know what you all want to see, so I will give it to you now. Here is her post-race interview.
Finally! Finally! Oh, it's such a relief, you know. Oh, the girls, they work so good. Oh, and they're standing there. Oh. Good job!
Fantastic stuff. Now, the general classification all hinged on the 4th and final day of the race, which was particularly tough. Clara Koppenberg and Katrine Allerud had their hearts broken with 700 metres to go. They had been part of a 30-woman group that had gone clear after about 50 kilometres, but Demi Vollering put in a big chase to set up her team leader, Anna van der Breggen. The world champion made her move with 500 metres remaining, and despite the best efforts of Annemiek van Vleuten, she had to settle for second on the stage and second to van der Breggen on the GC as well. Her only consolation, I guess, is that she now leads the Women's World Tour standings. She took the purple jersey away from Elisa Longo Borghini, who was so strong and consistent, of course, in the early season. The men's Spanish stage race last week was the Vuelta a Andalucía, or Ruta del Sol as it's often known, and it saw Superman Miguel Angel Lopez back to winning ways. The Movistar rider took stage 3 and took the race lead away from Ethan Hayter in the process, and he kept it through the remaining stages. Andre Greipel continues to wind back the clock. He took his second win in a week on stage 4, and if his data on Strava is accurate, he peaked at over 2,000 watts in that sprint. Not bad for a veteran. Who says you lose your speed as you get older? The final stage, though, saw another controversial swerve in the sprint, this time by Greipel's teammate at the Israel Startup Nation, Daryl Impey. The South African had just got in front of eventual stage winner Hayter and then moved over to the left and into the path of Robert Stannard of Team Bike Exchange, resulting in a very nasty-looking crash. Stannard was clearly furious after picking himself up off the ground, but later in a press release from his team, he was a lot more diplomatic, saying it was just a racing incident and that he was thankful neither of them were too badly injured. He had every right to be angry though. The UCI rules state that you shouldn't deviate from your sprinting line, and that's exactly what Impey did. Now, with the precedent set by the suspensions of Groenewegen and Buani, it's going to be interesting to see if there's a sanction from the UCI on that one. The day after that, it was the one-day Vuelta a Murcia, held under some ridiculously bad weather conditions. But emerging from them with a bright, beaming smile was Antonio Soto of Escotal de Bellescadi. And he had every reason to be happy, because that win was his first as a pro rider, it was in his hometown, and the first for his team this year too. A happy ending, I think you could say. In France, the one-day races continued with the Tour de Finistère, which saw a small group contest the victory. Benoit Cosnefroy of AG2R just pipping Sean Deby of Bingo's Power Sources, and another solid ride by Rasmus Tiller of Uno X Pro Cycling saw him take third. Incidentally, that was Cosnefroy's first win of the season as well. Right, we'll take a quick look now at the racing we've got coming up for you on GCN Plus this week. And there's actually a lot of it outside of the Giro d'Italia. And most of it will probably have finished by the time this comes out, but it's available for you to watch on demand. The Mersan Tour Alpes-Maritimes, the Ronde van Limburg, which sees Tim Merlier return to competition after fatigue from the Giro. And of course, it's the Queen stage of the Giro d'Italia, which will no doubt have completely changed everything and make everything I said at the start of this show completely irrelevant. It always is, anyway, I hear you say. The Giro takes a rest day tomorrow, but it will resume on Wednesday and will conclude on Sunday, of course, in Milan, which is the same day that the Criterium du Dauphiné starts. With the Olympics due to take place later this year, all races between it and the Giro have been moved forward a week, basically. Geraint Thomas and Richard Carapaz will be amongst the riders looking to hone their form ahead of the Tour de France, but Roglic and Pogačar are not competing at the Dauphiné. In fact, Roglic won't be seen racing again until the Tour de France, but you will be able to see Pogačar pin some numbers on at his home Grand Tour, the Tour of Slovenia, which is from the 9th to the 13th of June. And of course, we have that for you on GCN Plus. Territory restrictions do apply though, so please check what's available where you are. Also on GCN Plus this week, The World of Cycling, which comes out tomorrow on the Giro rest day. Sean Kelly will be joining Si on the sofa. Plus, we have got 2 more films, including one that is all about the history of the GPS head unit in cycling. So 10 years ago, barely any pro riders were using one, but now almost all of them are. Here's a quick trailer for you.
My head unit is constantly being tracked. I've also synced it to send that information to Strava.
Oh, I love a cheeky Strava segment. And that is definitely one of the ways in which GPS has enriched cycling.
I think this might be the KOM that I was trying to get. Fairly sure I would have it, but of course I've got no GPS to prove it.
The future tech of GPS is bigger, faster, stronger, cheaper.
Better instantaneous speed and elevation.
Whichever way you look at GPS, it's been nothing short of a revolution.
Ironically, I have actually just taken a wrong turn.
Stay tuned for that one coming out later this week. And actually, that's all for this week's GCN Racing News Show. Thanks, by the way, for all your kind comments on our Giro d'Italia and other racing coverage. It really means a lot. And in all honesty, it's just been an absolute pleasure to bring it to so many of you out there. Anyway, I'm off now to watch and talk about the Queen stage. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.